August 8th, 1969. Photographer Ian McMillan takes the photo that becomes the cover of the Beatles album Abbey Road. At Ringo's insistence, they also take a funny one where they try to look ugly, and one where we're shooting John outside a hotel in New York in 1980.
Welcome to The Revisionists. I'm Brian Flynn.
I'm Zach Powers.
Don't know why I said it like a prospector. Joining us, it's part of the great Revisionist Movie Trap crossover, the co-host
2020.
Of 2020.
It will be described in history books for years to come as somehow the worst event in the year 2020.
The breaking point is what the headlines will say tomorrow.
Yeah.
Co-host of that podcast, Chris Boriff, everyone.
Hello. Welcome and well met. Hello, everybody.
Thank you.
So excited to be on.
Chris and I did a podcast about 10 years ago that was a predecessor to the movie Trap, much as Brian and I did a podcast about 10 years ago that was a predecessor to this podcast.
So history echoes, I believe. That's the...
Yeah, the sheer level of quarantining outside encouraged everyone to jump back into making podcasts since there's nothing you can do outside except put yourself in danger. So, yeah.
The joke's on them because Brian and I never stopped. And actually, the joke is on us because we should have stopped.
Anyway, listeners, if you're new to the show, what we do each episode is we take a topic from history. One person presents the official, your daddy's version of events, and another person comes...
My dad actually goes to that person.
Ours.
Yeah, and don't dox my dad, but he goes to that person and tells them the actual...
Sorry, that's our new CBS sitcom, Don't Dox My Dad! Exclamation point.
It's on production hiatus, but we're hoping for 2022.
I had a dream about your dad, actually, the other night, now that I mention his name.
I didn't have a dream about your dad anytime recently.
I know.
Don't dox my dad. Isn't that kind of what the entire Incredible Hulk series was about? It's like he'd go to a town and be doxed and then have to keep walking down the road.
I mean, sure. Yeah. That and some other stuff was what it was about.
Famously, no one has been doxed more than the Incredible Hulk. Everybody knows it.
I mean, he's big, he's mean, he's green. He's very easy to pick out in a crowd. It's hard to hide.
Yeah, really, the most doxable person on the planet.
Yeah. And also, he wrote a tweet against Gamergate, and that was a mistake.
Well, no, it was the right thing to do, but yeah.
Right, ultimately
led to a kerfuffle. The other thing we do on the show is then another person tells not your daddy's version of that person, place, or thing from history, and the winner gets to become the truth going forward sorry, I'm getting some cat interference.
Yep, well, we have cat cameos this episode, deal with it. It's fine.
That cat cameo cost $200.
Yeah, exactly.
It was either that or John Voight, so...
The cat is not in the room with Brian. We bought a cameo. He's holding his phone to the microphone.
The thing is, it's still my cat. I had to buy a cameo for my own cat.
It's crazy just how many cats are on podcasts nowadays.
Oh, yeah.
Every podcast I know, there's a cat on it. It's all of them.
Yeah, Conan O'Brien's cat really started a whole movement.
Yeah. Some say Conan O'Brien's cat invented podcasts.
Last episode, we talked about Jon Snow, epidemiologist, and the alternate history won what was a very, very close vote in the end.
That alternate history was a crossover of the obvious go-to choice, which was Game of Thrones, because he has the same name as that guy from Game of Thrones. And ultimately, it became a version of the 90s Jack Frost film starring Michael Keaton. So go back
that was the movie. I was trying to remember what the fuck it was. I'm like, it wasn't Toy Story and it wasn't Birdman. It was something.
Weren't there a couple Jack Frost movies? There was the heartwarming one, and then there were all the murder ones. Okay, so good.
This was the family-friendly one, not the one where I believe there is a scene where a woman in a bathtub is killed by him putting his nose down south. It's not a good movie.
Hey.
Oh, no.
His
I think
carrot nose.
It sounds familiar that Shannon Elizabeth or somebody
I think
like
she
that
was the
might have
woman in
been
the
it.
bathtub.
Oh,
I believe
okay.
she was
Well,
the
that
bathtub woman, yeah. I
yeah.
saw it in a sleepover in elementary school.
That the way it was meant to be seen.
Yeah.
But thank you to Katie Hannon for that. This time around, while we're still in this medical history vein, we'll be discussing Johann Conrad Dippel. Zach, you'll be doing the true story.
Yep.
And Chris, you'll be doing the alternate.
I'll be doing the truer story. Yep.
All right, boys. Well, whenever you're ready, hit me with your best shot.
Dr. Dippel, before being employed by Willy Wonka, was born on the 10th of August in 1673 at Castle Frankenstein in Germany. So, as you might have guessed already, got some connection to that other Frankenstein.
Young Frankenstein,
The doctor,
of course.
of course, I mean. Thank you. Do not get confused. He studied theology, philosophy, and alchemy at the University of Gießen, which is also in Germany. He got a master's degree in theology in 1693. And you know what they say? Alchemy, bad major. I don't think you're never going to get a job with an alchemy major. Is the saying.
Theology, though,
it's the long
and philosophy.
Yeah, but it's the long-term goal, you see, because the whole trick with alchemy is you want to find the elixir of life, and once you got that, you basically can take as much time as you want to get the rest of those degrees. Yeah. So it's the long degree. Yeah.
But I just love that this guy chose theology and philosophy, and then his third choice was even more useless than those.
I want to picture what an alchemy class was, what that lecture consisted of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you just pour some mercury on a frog and see what happens.
I just picture someone like writing lead on a chalkboard with a question mark and then like an equal sign.
Yeah, they have a piece of paper that says lead and they slowly flip it over and it says gold.
Yeah, the one of my favorite details is that how they used to detect lead was that it had a sweet taste. Mm-hmm. Like when you lick the lead rock, it's like, oh, it's a little sweet. That's lead.
It's like that scene in The Last Jedi where the guy just like licks the salt off the ground for no reason. I like that movie, but that scene makes no sense.
Yeah,
I forgot about that scene.
He's on an alien planet covered in a white substance, and he's just like, gonna try and lick this.
Yeah, and then, it's also the scene where there's a cameo from, like, Gareth Edwards, who did Rogue One, where he's the other guy in the same thing, where he just looks over and he's like, huh, why did you do that? Yeah. And they never address it. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. That's enough about The Last Jedi for this edition. We'll get back to our Last Jedi. Inside of our podcast, Chris, we have a Last Jedi minute-by-minute podcast.
Yes.
We did our minute for this week. It was the Salt Minute. Next up, Luke Skywalker is going to stand in front of some AT-ATs. It's great.
Mm-hmm. God, I love that movie.
He, after getting his master's, he published a number of theological works under the name Christian Democritus. Christianus Democritus. Christianus Democritus.
That is like a Facebook page your uncle follows.
I know, yeah. This is an alt-right like meme generator. Right now, they're like, they put out every day like stuff about how we shouldn't be worried about coronavirus because there's pedophiles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
a thing, by the way, that is definitely happening.
Look, walk and chew gum, people. That's all I can say.
Anyway. So he started getting interested in Hermetic studies in 1700. And a former friend of his, a preacher by the name of Conrad Brosk, eventually became his rival because he refused to publish Dippel's work, which was some kind of anti-Protestant piece. And in response, Dippel accused him of collusion and conspiracy. So that was fun.
With the Protestants or just like
with
in
the
general?
authorities is what it said.
This would have been like This would have been like pre 60 Years War, so yeah, or 30 Years War.
Now,
That's Catholics versus Protestants, right?
I mean, it was, but I think this was
about 1704.
After,
yeah.
way after then.
Yeah.
Yeah, 30
Time-
Years War
yes.
was like.
First thing to do, go on a history podcast and then get the dates wrong. Okay, no, you guys are correct. It was way before. It was
Yeah.
way before.
Yeah, it was not that long before. It was in the 1600s, but
Look,
mid
there's
to
a-
late 1600s. But
There's a lot of fucking wars in this time around this neck of the woods, so it's easy to get mixed up.
regardless, the name of the piece, I'm guessing it was anti-Protestant based on some of the things that Dippel believed, and also the name was the Scourging Papacy of the Protestants. So it sounds like it.
Weirdly, it was a recipe for pineapple upside down cake. That's all it was.
His theological beliefs were very controversial. There was a man named Emanuel Swedenborg, who was for a while a big proponent of Dippel's beliefs. Dippel wanted to dissolve the formal church and instead have everybody have a more personal relationship to religion and Christianity, and also supported not taking the Bible as the literal word of God, all of which sounds pretty good to me, but back then was not as cool. Swedenborg eventually turned on Dippel because he accused him of being an opportunist with no real principles. He said he had a quick temper, and he did not allow dissent on his ideas from anyone. So it sounds like he was kind of a douche, maybe.
Aaron Burr type.
Yeah.
I mean, these all could be like compliments in German, though. That's the thing to realize.
It's all in
Like
the
it sounds in
intonation.
English. Yeah, it sounds in English like it's terrible criticism, but over there it's just saying he's a really nice guy.
Yeah, Swedenborg seemed to think that he was more or less almost a wannabe like cult leader with his new approach to religion, which probably is an exaggeration. And he was eventually came to think he was trying to drive people from the church to, quote, take away their intelligence of truth and good. So I guess
that's an interesting way to phrase that.
yeah. He also called him a most vile devil. So that's fun.
MVD.
Anyway, Dippel didn't shut his fucking mouth and got in prison for 7 years for heresy.
Perfect.
Yeah, so he got 7 years for heresy, and after that was done, he created something called Dippel's oil, which tastes. It sounds like it tastes delicious. Again,
Okay, I was gonna say.
it sounds like a Wonka invention, as I mentioned earlier. But in fact, it has very few practical uses. It was sort of effective as a bug repellent. Eventually, he used it to create a unique blue ink called Prussian blue, which is, I believe, still used today. And during around World War II-ish, it had some use in that you could poison water wells and make them undrinkable, but the substance wasn't poisonous itself. It just made the water undrinkable for some reason I'm not clear on.
Just like
So it
some
didn't-
chemical reaction.
Yeah,
Exactly.
it because it tastes bad.
Yeah. So it
They just
didn't
dumped it in.
You could poison people's water without violating the Geneva Conventions, and that was popular in World War II.
Yikes.
Hey,
Yeah. But Dippel claimed that it was an elixir of life, and he unsuccessfully tried to trade the formula to Dippel's oil for his childhood home of Castle Frankenstein. Didn't work.
Yeah, the owner was holding out for Lunchables, I think, or Lunchables pizza.
Yeah, exactly.
That's where the real money is.
He did work at Castle Frankenstein for a time, regardless, though. A lot of points in his life are kind of myths, or they're unclear. There was rumors that he blew up one of the towers of Castle Frankenstein with nitroglycerin.
Tight.
This is probably not true, because there's no reliable record of it, and nitroglycerin hadn't been discovered yet. So that seems unlikely.
Yeah, that seems like a big check mark against that.
Also, there were a lot of rumors that he experimented with human cadavers and specifically was trying to commit some kind of soul transference between bodies. And that this experimentation got him driven out of town by an angry mob. There's not a lot of historical evidence that any of this actually happened. There's a little bit of stuff for the cadavers and soul transference. It's not concrete, but I'll get to it later. He was banned from several countries for, again, his religious beliefs and not his corpse experiments.
His cadaver stuff, yeah.
Yeah. He had to also flee his hometown after killing a man in a duel and for failing to pay back creditors who had invested in his alchemy works, theoretically. Dippel, seemed to be a bit of a con man. You might have picked that up from the Dippel oil.
From the Dippel's oil, yeah.
Yeah. Some accounts say that as he grew older, he fully lost his faith and said that Christ was an indifferent being and turned his focus fully to alchemy.
There's something about
I mean, it sounded cooler to me right now. He's like, no more of this Christ business. I want to burn some shit.
Look, I want to stay grounded on things I can really, really perceive and see. Things I know are there. I'm going to stick with alchemy.
Yeah. So he continued to claim he had created an elixir of life as his life went on. He also started making claims that he had potions that could exorcise demons and that he could indeed transfer souls between bodies with a funnel. So
I'm picturing like a kitchen funnel.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering how the funnel's set up. Is it like one body's hanging above the other? Is like a soul heavier than air or lighter than air?
It's like
That's
a beer
my
bong.
question.
Yeah, it's a beer bong for souls.
The person's
Okay, a
standing
gravity
underneath
bong
it with
for
their mouth
souls.
open.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. You can also shotgun souls if you're so inclined. Just pop somebody in the back of the neck with a blade and then turn them upside down and suck the soul out of them.
Yeah, if you've ever done a soul stand, you'll kind of know what that's like.
It's a regular corpse shucking. I think that's what they call that. Corpse shucking.
Yeah.
I mean, if you've ever played soul pong, you'll know that's not really an effective way to get a lot of souls in you really quickly.
Now, you won't be too surprised when I describe the method for Irish car bombing souls.
Is it just an Irish car bomb?
Yeah, it's pretty much. The IRA got that one in one.
As an Irish person, we do just call them car bombs. So,
but it has to be in Ireland. That's the trick. All right. So he eventually got set up with a lab in Wittgenstein, and this period of his life is not as well documented. He was at least once accused by a minister of grave robbing, experimenting on corpses, and consorting with the devil. So that's a nice little trifecta.
Survey
Almost an
says.
EGOT. Yeah. If he had a witchcraft in there, it'd be a real EGOT, but not quite. Anyway, it's also possible, some people speculate that Dippel may have actively spread certain rumors about himself, including about the corpse experimentation, or that he sold his soul for dark knowledge and was a sorcerer, because it made people more willing to pay for his secret knowledge and bogus potions.
I mean, that totally makes sense. It's like street cred, or when you go into like a dispensary and they start telling you about the different strains, and it's like, none of this it's just going to make me feel funny, isn't it? And that's the only truth in all that.
Yeah.
But it makes it seem cool when you go in and they seem knowledgeable. Yeah.
It's also just like wild marketing to be like, yeah, I'm the corpse guy. I'm going to lean into that.
Mm-hmm.
It is definitely true, though it should be noted that Dippel definitely did experiment on dead animal corpses often. He was described as a, quote, avid dissector. So, yeah, he cut open a lot of animals. Sometimes he used their bits to make his potions.
I mean, avid dissector. That could be anybody who just like really enjoys going to KFC.
Yeah, that's
That's
just
so
so
getting a bucket of
context
chicken
sensitive.
wings.
Yeah. So in 1733, he claimed he had created an elixir that would extend his life to 135, and in 1734 he died. In April 1734 to be exact. Most probably it was a stroke or something like that. Some people suspected poisoning, but as we've discussed on previous episodes, anytime anybody died in this time period, someone suspected poisoning. So take it with a grain of salt.
And as we've been kind of like touching on in the medical history episode, the water was essentially poison in a lot of places around this time.
And he was making like animal juice elixirs and assumedly drinking them. So
I'm just picturing
Animal juice. It's what's good for kids.
Let's see, we got purple stuff. Ooh, squeezed bits of possum. Okay.
well, the problem nowadays is that they're all artificial animal.
Yeah.
They don't have it. You have to go to Whole Foods to find authentic animal juice.
No, I'm on a juice cleanse. Shoves raccoon in juicer. Yeah.
So the big thing that kind of cemented his legacy, though, is that there is a lot of unconfirmed but very plausible speculation that Dippel was the inspiration and basis for Dr. Frankenstein in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. I think the modern Prometheus part is important. People forget it, but it is important. People always say Frankenstein is the doctor, not the creature. But I think the doctor should actually be referred to as the modern Prometheus. So please take the note.
This is the
Doctor, the modern
take.
Prometheus.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm
Please,
just
my
picturing
father
you
was the
saying-
modern Prometheus. Just call me Doctor Modern Prometheus.
Exactly. The modern Prometheus's monster is what I would prefer. the creature to be called. Regardless, unless you're an especially stupid listener, you've probably noticed that his castle was named Frankenstein, and that's also the name of that book. The castle was. I should note that
The castle was not called Modern Prometheus.
Yeah, it wasn't called Castle Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus. It was just.
It causes a lot of confusion because there's Creature Castle as well, so people get confused.
And there's, of course, Castle Son of Frankenstein.
Right. But it's,
And there's Castle Freak as well,
Yeah.
so
Castle
there's all
Freak,
sorts
yeah,
of them.
You don't want to go to.
Castle Abbott and Costello meet the mummy. Yeah.
Regardless, aside from that bit of coincidence that supports this theory, Shelley had also visited the area in which Dippel lived several times. She would have visited not too long after his death, only a few decades, and he had become kind of a famous figure in the area in the intervening years, almost a subject of some folklore and myth. So it seems extremely plausible that when she stopped by, she visited the castle, for instance, and she had friends and visited the university where Dippel got his start. So it's extremely plausible that someone would have told her about Dippel, or she would have heard the tales. Her diary implies that she did indeed hear some local folklore while she was in that region and wished to revisit it someday. And her diary also had her starting to become interested in ideas like bringing a life back to a corpse not long after one of her visits to the area. So it seems like there's a pretty good chance Dippel might have been the inspiration for Dr. Frankenstein and the Frankenstein tale. Regardless, however, though again, no hard proof. Regardless, Dippel has appeared and been referenced in a ton of monster movies, ton of books, ton of, magazines with horror stories in them. Usually he's has some connection to Dr. Frankenstein or the creature, or is a replacement for the doctor. Occasionally, he's like extremely long-lived and really found the elixir of life. There's one where he's an immortal who briefly worked for Hitler. So, you know, but most of them seem very trashy and like
You don't say after that description.
But that is the story of the real-life Frankenstein / a snake oil salesman named Johann Conrad Dippel.
Did you say Johann?
Johann? Did I say Johann? I meant Johann.
Yeah, I think you said Johann.
Johann's Fabrics.
Yeah, that's right.
We don't have an audio recording of him saying it, okay? So
That's true.
it is possible.
That is our sponsor, Johann's Fabrics, which is your number one source for all your corpse reanimation and animal juicing needs. Also, I feel like I need to say this. Please don't juice animals. It's cruel.
Unless you're a farmer and you're getting milk. I mean, that's okay. That's technically juicing an animal.
I don't think that's technically true. I don't think so. Milking and juicing seem different.
Out?
I mean, it's definitely partially juicing the cow.
Yeah.
Sorry,
just not taking it the rest of the way.
Milk is cow juice. That should have been the name, to be honest.
I forgot about all your time down at the ranch. I should have deferred to you there, partner. Zach, thank you.
Of course.
Chris, whenever you're ready.
All right. So my first and foremost thing is I'm going to say that all the things that have been said about Dippel are not true. They're incorrect. They are specious rumors. Specifically, the big Cerulean Blue Company. Big Cerulean is backing an alternative history. And they've started this whole story about Frankenstein and the background and all of it.
Of course, headquartered in Cerulean City.
From
Here's
Pokemon?
the deal.
Yep.
Nope. We were talking about him. You mentioned Dippel's oil, right?
I did
the
mention
gross
Dippel's
tasting
oil.
stuff. Yeah, it's roughly made when you take bones and you make a bong, and then you burn it in a retort flask, and it goes over into an Erlenmeyer flask with water running on it, and then it condensifies down into that gross oil that was described.
This is also the second episode where we've talked about making a bong.
Yeah. Just imagine a cool Vince Gilligan Breaking Bad, montage of the making of Dippel oil, and you're set. There's a lot
It's
of flasks.
basically it is exactly the stuff you'd see in the background of like a Frankenstein movie, where it's the big chemistry things and all that stuff.
one of those lightning ball. Maybe they have one of those lightning balls from Spencer's
Yeah, I
Gifts.
was gonna say.
Yeah.
One of those pins you press your hand into and it retains the indentation. Yeah. Fucking fake poop. Spencer's Gifts, baby.
Yeah. And then let me see. And then essentially, like, what goes down is that he bounces around for a couple years, tries to tell people to eat it. Everyone's saying this stuff's gross. We don't want to eat it.
They don't understand he's not insulting them.
Yeah, he's just like, eat it. It's gonna be good for you. And
Yeah,
they're like, no, this is.
That's how he would start conversations with strangers. He would hold it up and just say, "Eat it."
Eat it. Until one day he met a man named Weird Al Yankovic who got a great idea.
Well, like you were saying, he came up with Prussian blue, and there's the whole deal with that, because it was him and another guy named Johann. There were two Johanns, and it was the two Johanns. They had a laboratory in Berlin.
Now that I've thought about it, and his weird alchemy setup with the the flasks and stuff, and the Prussian blue, if I had done the alternate fully, it would have been a Breaking Bad thing.
Sorry, I thought you were going to make a Weird Alchemy Yankovic thing.
I should have gone full meth. You're right.
Weird alchemy.
Well, it was sort of like that, because like,
please don't say full meth again. That's like a good thing.
Well, it's weird because the whole deal with it is that with Prussian blue, like, we had at one point in time had blue as a color, and people wanted blue. They had Egyptian blue. It was the light fast blue they use in all the Egyptian tomes. The problem is just like with the original thing for cement, we lost all of it. Like concrete, we lost those to time because the cultures they came from broke down into nothing and no one wrote anything down, and they couldn't read it anyway because it was just people standing on the side of a thing. So the problem is that years later, these two dudes were just
That's what all
chilling.
the archaeologists say when they find the hieroglyphs. They're like, it's just people standing on the side of a thing.
Oh my God, we recovered documents from the Library of Alexandria. I can't wait to crack it. It's just people standing on a thing. There's a fucking bird. What the fuck is this shit? I quit.
Like my kids draw these pictures too. I don't understand.
My kid could
My
invent
kids
this.
could do this. My kid could have made the pyramids.
Look at it. It's just a bunch of squares.
Often kids, yes, were making pyramids, yes.
Oh, you made a wonder of the world. My kid could do it in second grade art class.
Forget about it. This is getting
Hang
more
in
and more
gardens.
Brooklyn.
You just plant the gardens up high. They're going to hang.
I got your Pharaoh's lighthouse right here.
So that backs it up. Here's the idea. Way back in the day, they had blue, then they lost blue, and everybody was looking to make blue again. So it was a hot race for blue. Everybody could do every other color. So all the paintings from before that period were all black and red because that's all people could remember. And you go all the way back in history, it's just black and red because they just didn't have any other colors. And people would look up at the sky and they didn't have a name for it. They just wave their hand and go, I don't know, there's a vague lack of red and blue up there. And red and black up there. And it would just be blue, and they wouldn't know. So, here's what happens.
Interestingly enough, as crazy as this may sound, listener, if you read the Odyssey and stuff, they do describe the sky as wine-like, and a lot of scholars believe it's because they didn't have like a word or a concept for blue. So red and blue were kind of the same for those people.
There was like a whole radio lab about this, I think, actually.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny because once you jump forward in time, people are still making a lot of money off colors. They're like, you want some red? I got some red. You want some black? I got some black. Big color. People were all into it. It was like the chemistry of biotech is now, but it was like, ooh, who can make a slightly redder red? Who can make a black that's a little greenish? It was a big thing. So
Elon Musk Sr. came up with lavender, and it was a big deal. A lot of people followed him on Twitter.
Well, here's the deal with this one. Like, when Johann was looking for a place to do his, like, alchemy and his, like, search for, like, the finest of bone char turned into, like, bone oil, gross resin. He was selling resin is basically what he was selling. So he met another Johann named Johann Jacob Deisbach. And Johann Jacob Deisbach was busy making red pigment at the time out of cochial, which is a cochineal. It's an insect that crawls on cacti that they were getting from South America. And what they do is they take a whole bunch of them, grind them up, and it would make this really, really dark red ochre color. And then they'd mix it into other things. So this guy's just sitting there doing his shop. He's just mixing up some of that red, mixing up some of that Berliner red.
Crushing buds, making green.
Yep, crushing bud, doing that thing. And then, lo and behold, the other Johann's sitting at the other desk, and he's got some dirty-ass tool that he's been jamming into his beakers, and it's got a bunch of that gross bone oil all over it. just a whole lot of bone sauce, animal oil they called it, and he left it on it. And the other guy, the other Johann, grabs it, jams it into his mixture, and starts smishing it around, just trying to mix it.
This man knows chemistry.
Yeah, and
this is basically how he described the alchemy class earlier.
It's true, yeah.
But he throws his hands up and he says, "Scheiß die Wand an," which is shit on the wall. This is an actual German exclamation of excitement to yell shit on the wall.
Yep.
Essentially, what happens is the other Johann says, "You've got a lot of pepper in your ass today. What's going on?" Which is also a real German term for when someone's very, very excitable. And he says, "I just made blue, but I made the hottest new blue." And they went on to like make tons of money because no one had made the color blue that was light fast and would last for a long time. So, Prussian blue was the first synthetic or semi-synthetic blue that was light fast for many years. And after that, people started using blue in all sorts of stuff. Like, it blew up. It was like the Beatles, man. Just it was going all across cultures. If you go and you like pick up a copy of Kadashuki Hokusu Eyes, The Great Wave off Kanagawa, The Great Wave, the blue on that is the Prussian blue because it went over there and then it came back, just like heavy metal music went back and forth. It went over to, Sweden from America and then back, right? And when it came back, it was a different deal. So this time when it came back, everybody thought, oh, it's like a Japanese thing. So then you start having people like, Van Gogh starts breaking out the blues. He starts doing Starry Skies. And, suddenly it's not a scream
That's very
business
close to
anymore.
what that painting is called, yeah.
Yeah, just Starry Skies. And so what I'm saying is that was the main thing. And then years later, they came by and suddenly this Swiss guy named Albert Hopfner discovers cerulean blue, which is made by mining things, right? You got to dig up minerals. Everything we were talking about was just take some bones, you crush them up, you melt them, and you take some of those bugs, you shmoo them together, and you get blue. This other thing, you got to get a whole bunch of dudes. They got to go downstairs and dig. They got to bring up the stuff.
Go downstairs.
They got to work it out. They got to go downstairs in the mine. They got to, dig things up, drag it up, and that's super expensive, and you just can't make that effective. You got these other people who are making this cheap blue. You got this new blue that's really fancy, and you want to sell it to people, but it's too hard to get out of the ground, and you can't make people pay those high prices for blue because you already got the cheap blue out there. So what do? You got to start throwing out falsehoods about the guy who came up with it. So you can't just come out and say, oh, that other blue's shit, because people are going to say, oh, it looks the same. You got to go after the guy who made it, right? So this is what I'm saying. It's just a long con. It's just big cerulean. It's the George Rowney ceruleum more expensive 1860 scandal is what I'm describing, guys. I'm doxing it. I'm blowing it up. So my suggestion is that it's the Frankenstein thing. It's a strong goal, but I think that if we're gonna go for it, it's really got to be big cerulean trying to discredit him. That's what I think has happened.
I also love Big Cerulean as the name of like a mobster and like a Frank Miller.
The thing I like about that story is, in part, is that aside from this conspiracy against him, when he was just a regular guy, most of what he did was walk up to people and try to get them to eat things or pour his oil in random flasks.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of history in that in Germany, though. There's, it's one of the big things they like to yell is Im Kreis kotzen, which is when you're upset in Germany, you gather around in a circle and vomit. Oh. Yeah. Im Kreis kotzen. It's vomiting in a circle.
That's man, what a heritage part of me has. I mean, also it's the same thing with like, oh, there's pepper in your butt. Of being like, that doesn't seem like a thing that would get you excited. Like it would seem like be more just like distressing or confusing.
Well, I think it's supposed to be something like when somebody says in America, you've got a lot of piss and vinegar.
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing.
Say pep in your step, right? Those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but piss and vinegar is sort of the same thing, where it's like, oh my god, I have too much piss. Also, I'm drinking vinegar.
Are you just now discovering that a lot of idioms don't really make like logical, literal sense?
Well, no, not just now
discovering.
Where have you been killing all these birds with one stone?
Well, it's one of those things, like, I actually have, like, I was born in Germany, and I have, like, German family members, so I can talk about it a little bit, but, like, my dad goes on this whole thing about how American idioms and insults are all, like, perversion-based, but all the German insults are all scatological-based. Mm-hmm. So it's, like, in America, we'll call people, like, I don't know what you guys... I should ask, do you guys just curse openly?
Oh,
or
yeah.
is there
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Like we call people like motherfuckers and like, I don't know, like, that essentially. But over there, they'll call people like an asshead or an ass licker or, dumb cop or something like that.
Yeah.
they'll give them some sort of a scatological based insult. Anyway.
Yeah, fucking German.
Sorry, that was a yes hand grenade.
No. I wasn't sure if you already knew German or if you had looked up specific phrases for your alternate history.
No, these are all real. Yeah, I got introduced to them when I was a kid over there. I was like, what does that mean?
No, I'm familiar with some of those. Chris, thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move on to judgment, I just want to say, hey, listeners, if you want, you can maybe pledge some money to us on Patreon, which is great. Putting the show together is not expensive, but it's also not free, believe it or not. And that helps us cover the costs.
And also, additionally, you can write a review on iTunes, because that increases the visibility of the podcast
And
for some reason.
Yeah, we don't know. It's one of those weird things that no one can quite figure out how it works.
As always, as long as you give us 5 stars, we don't care what you write. You can write anything you want.
I've definitely high-fived you guys and given you a heart on Spotify. I have no idea if that helps you at all on iTunes. I don't know how these things work.
I mean, that's also a good point. If you listen on another provider, reviews there probably help also. We're on all the major ones, Spotify, Google Play, which is being weird, Apple, and Stitcher.
In addition to that, you might have noticed the world is still terrible. So if you don't feel like giving money to us, perhaps you could give it to something related to COVID relief or Black Lives Matter or just a political campaign that looks to unseat some terrible people.
I'll also throw in there right now the Lebanese Red Cross. We've talked a lot about my ancestry on this episode. I'm also Lebanese. And obviously, they've needed a lot of help for a while, and the recent explosion has made things much worse. So if you can throw some money to the Lebanese Red Cross, because they are on the ground doing a lot of good work right now. Also, lastly, you can always talk to us. That's free on social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, just search Revisionist Podcast on all of those, or send us a letter at revisionistpodcast.com. Just go to the contact page and tell us what you think. Tell us how much pepper we have in our butts. And sorry, I'm just picturing that like a guess the number of jelly beans in a jar game and you win. I don't know what you would win in this case. Anyway.
I should also say, if you enjoyed this, 2 of the 3 of us are on the Movie Trap podcast, which we mentioned earlier. Yeah. Brian is also on an episode that will not yet be out at the time of the release of this podcast. I strongly hinted at what movie he was covering last time without saying it, so I think I made it about as obvious as you possibly can.
Depending on your release time, it could be coming out in a couple weeks, I think.
I'm putting this
the
out
next one's
tomorrow, so...
Oh, well, the most recent one you've heard then would have been the one we just put out today, Blind Spotting. So, a couple weeks coming, and we will have you on, Brian.
Yeah, yep. We had another recording that I was trying to schedule fall through, so this is going to be coming out tomorrow. Anyway. Sorry, Zach, you were saying something?
No, just... if you like this for some reason, listen to that. It's mostly similar.
Subscribe or potentially like even. I don't know.
Yeah, it also has a video component, so you can look at our faces.
But that brings this train to the old judgment station. And that falls to me this episode. And I think we have something that doesn't happen all that often, where I feel like the alternate history, the person doing that also went and did like complementary research. like outside of the purview of just making
It's true,
shit up.
Yeah, most people do not
yeah.
look at one word about the real person they're talking about.
Which is totally
Yeah,
fine.
I live a fear-based life, so I try to always research everything.
Yeah, no, I've read your self-help book, The Fear-Based Life. I abide by its principles.
Most people, it's just like, oh, this is about a Chinese empress. She's like a Dolly Parton figure.
Well, I mean, y'all are comedians, so I figured, if I can't keep up with you on a yes and, at least I can be well researched to drag everything to a screaming halt with facts.
That's a great strategy, and to reward that, I'm going to cast my vote for the alternate history. But listeners, voting on your end is now open on Patreon, and check out the Instagram poll coming next week if you're listening to this on the day of the release, next Wednesday. But Chris, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This has been awesome.
Yep. Zach, thank you as always.
Yep.
For everyone here at the Revisionists, I'm Brian Flynn.
I'm Zach Powers. You've said your name weird both times this episode.
Both times. I don't know what the fuck. It seems like each episode I get worse at ending the thing. Yeah. Have a good time. There. How do you like that? Animals. August 8th, 1963. In England, 15 robbers pull off the Great Train Robbery, making off with £2.6 million and the demo of Drops of Jupiter. August 8th, 1974. President Richard Nixon announces his resignation, effective the next day, so that night he could throw the biggest rager this town has ever seen. August 8th, 1876. Thomas Edison receives a patent for his mimeograph. On the outside, he seemed happy, but deep down he really wished he could just be electrocuting an elephant. Last one. August 8th, 870. King Louis the German and his half-brother Charles the Bald partitioned the Frankish kingdom. Germany in the east, Bald City in the west. Fucked that up, but fuck it.
All right. I also have 4. August 8th, 1863. Following his defeat at Gettysburg, Robert E. Lee sends a letter of resignation to Jefferson Davis, but it's refused upon receipt because if there's one thing that the Confederacy loves, it's forcing people to do jobs and not allowing them to quit.
Oh, man.
August 8th, 1876. Thomas Edison receives a patent for his mimeograph, an invention that really showed his skill at copying the ideas of other people. I'm kind of messing one up, but it's not my best one anyway, so I'm going to keep going. August 8th, 1908. The Wright brothers' first public flight occurs at a race course in Le Mans, France. Their first private flight was to their summer home in the Hamptons. And August 8th...
Hi. Sorry.
That's right.
I'm getting...
And you're getting attacked by a cat, I see.